During my teenage years, I had very few memories of my father. It sounds cruel, but that's what often happens when you lose a loved one at a young age. As I remember it, my dad stood out from the people in our town. He was, you could say, a black sheep, but in a good way. I grew up to be the same, first as an outcast in my family, then in the town. The place where I was born and lived for most of my life seemed stuck in time. Traditions and customs were carefully preserved, and children became exact copies of their parents and ancestors. This might sound like an exaggeration, but it was true. Our clothes and tools were made in our village, and books and anything foreign were discouraged. Girls were taught that their destiny was to care for the home, children, garden, and do needlework. Men had limited options: fisherman, helmsman, doctor, electrician, or a store or bar owner. That was it. By tradition, most men went on fishing trips, regardless of their wishes, health, or the weather. This resulted in a tragic phenomenon known as the Curse of the Sons. The Curse of the Sons was named that because too many men died during those trips. I was lucky to be an only child. If I had a brother, I'm sure it would have been him who died. The strange thing about the curse was that the weakest son always died. Some died from an asthma attack, some during a storm, some fell overboard or were injured. Often, the cause was a fight with an animal, and death by shark was especially revered. The reason for my father's death was hidden from me. My father was different. He didn't want to be a fisherman, as was expected. His big dream was to be a writer. But according to the town's rules, every man was obligated to go to sea at least once a year. Otherwise, he was forced to leave the town. The last time I saw my father was on the pier in 1986 before he left for his mandatory fishing trip. My father could read and write, which was a rarity for us, and since we had no schools, the illiteracy rate was high. He taught me to read and write and gave me many books, some of them his own. Toward the end of his life, he worked as a newspaper reporter. It didn't bring in much money, but he was doing what he loved. When my father died, it was as if nothing had happened. I didn't even see any real grief from my mother. She was always cold and reserved. I never particularly loved her. My grandmother, Pearl, was close to me, but after my father's death, she seemed to disappear. She lived in the same house, but started avoiding me, and my visits to her became short. I felt lonely. But not long, as another person appeared in my life, my Uncle Joe. Uncle Joe was my father's twin brother and his complete opposite, a strong fisherman, a true macho man, and a local legend. Men respected him, and women desired him. He went on many fishing trips around the world and was the best in our town after Ernest Weiss, the same fisherman who mysteriously disappeared around the same time my father died. Joe never married, dedicating his whole life to his work and his crew. His cousins, Lorenzo and Fabrizio Moretti, and Mark Marshall, the son of the owners of the largest store. Despite the distrust of outsiders, these three were accepted. They were big and strong, and you didn't want to mess with them. After my father's death, Joe was the only one who comforted me. When I asked about my dad's death, he attributed it to the curse of the sons, and I believed him. How could I not believe a hero? He brought us fresh fish and secretly gave me books from another town for my birthdays. He treated me like a son. 10 years later, in 1996, my grandmother Pearl was dying. I was the only one in the room. My uncle was on a trip, and my mother had gone somewhere. My grandmother asked for forgiveness and said something strange. "I'm so sorry about your father. I shouldn't have let it happen. Every time I see you, I feel like you'll have the same fate." These words sparked doubt and curiosity in me. To drown out my anxiety, I went to Hugo Hellman's tavern. Hugo noticed my state and told me, "Your father was a good man, but good people often have bad luck." I didn't immediately understand what he meant. The next morning, Hugo brushed off my questions, but later he asked me to come to the pub that evening and gave me an old newspaper, the one my father had written. The headline was shocking. "The Curse of the Sons, the Shameful Tradition of Our Town." The article revealed the truth. For centuries, the town believed that only one son in a family should survive. Families chose the weakest son and sacrificed him to the sea god during a fishing trip, throwing him into the ocean for good luck and rich catch. Most adults knew and stayed silent. Fear and ambition kept the tradition alive. Sometimes mothers were forced to allow this. Hugo revealed another detail. My father and uncle had no father or grandfather, meaning no one could decide which of the brothers would die. My grandmother Pearl told them the truth about the sacrifice at 18, thinking that since there was no man to choose, neither of them would be killed. My father and uncle lived on. Later, Ernest Weiss, the best fisherman, appeared. He started dating my grandmother, and Joe admired him, though when Ernest chose my uncle for the sacrifice, not my father, Joe felt betrayed. Resentment and jealousy led to a plan of revenge. My uncle Joe convinced my father to write the revealing article, knowing it would turn people against him. When Ernest took my father and Joe on the annual fishing trip, the plan went further. Ernest tried to sacrifice my uncle, but he defended himself, killing Ernest, and then he killed my father. The town took it calmly. Many hated my father for his article. My grandmother fell into a depression and distanced herself. Hugo said that after these events, Joe changed. His crew members, when drunk, would talk about my uncle soon becoming a father. Recalling the strange episode with my mother at the grandmother's funeral, her friend touching her stomach, I realized my mother was my uncle's lover. My heart sank. In a couple of days, it was my turn for the annual fishing trip, and I clearly felt the threat. I asked Hugo what to do. He said there was still a chance to come up with a plan to get rid of my uncle. I agreed. That same night, my uncle burst into the tavern. He attacked Hugo with a knife, then turned on me, grabbing the newspaper and hitting me. I was prepared to die, but Hugo performed a heroic act. He pulled out his own knife and stabbed my uncle in the back of the knee. Both were bleeding. We tied my uncle up, gagged him, and dragged him to the pier, the same place where I last saw my father. Hugo suggested we just drown him, but that wasn't enough for me. I wanted to settle the score for my father, Ernest, and my grandmother. I stabbed him 3 times, one for each. Then we threw my uncle into the ocean and watched him sink. Hugo left with his family to Malta, giving me an address and some money. I stayed, breaking into the house through the window and taking my father's books, the only things I took with me as I left forever. I thought about killing my mother, but didn't. Years passed. Life seemed to have settled down until recently I received a message from Nicolette, Hugo's daughter. Her father was killed. It came with a photo of a letter addressed to me, threatening that I was next. The letter was signed by my uncle's crew and a name that turned out to be the name of my uncle and mother's son, the one they were perhaps preparing to replace me. Now I'm forced to constantly move. I know I should have killed my mother when I had the chance. Now I live in fear that they will come for me, and I'm afraid of ending up like the weakest son.